Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rick Brown, and I and my colleague Jen Dix will be co-hosting today's presentation. We're very excited to have you with us. Just to begin, we will begin with a welcome and an introduction from our speakers, who I'll turn it over to introduce themselves shortly. But before that, just to give you a quick heads up, we will have a very interactive discussion as part of our town hall. And as part of this, we will be able to allow you to raise your hand. So if you'll look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little icon that's hand shaped that will allow you to raise your hand, and we will be able to unmute you once you're able to do so. However, you can also tap directly into the chat function or use the Q&A as well during the call. And we definitely hope to hear from you. We hope it'll be a very interactive and engaging session. So with that, I will turn it over to Amanda to kick us off.
Thanks, Rick. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on, actually, for the most part, I think we're all in afternoon now, looking at 3 o'clock, unless we have some phenomenal colleagues from Hawaii who may be joining us. But hope it has been a fantastic day. My name is Amanda Pierce-Kelly. I'm the Executive Director at ACU. I'm really excited for the conversation today, and it really is intended to be a conversation. We want to hear from you guys about how we can be responsive and supportive to you. I'm eager to turn it over to my fantastic colleagues to lead us through this conversation. But to start, I just wanted to share with you guys sort of the impetus behind why we launched the National Center and sort of all of the amazing things going on at ACU. And so just to start there, believe it or not, I think some people know this, but many may not, ACU is actually in its 29th year. So for a long time, ACU has really been doing the hard work of workforce. We were founded by participants and alumni of the National Health Service Corps. And so it was a group of providers at the time who came together and really thought, boy, we need an organization that's specifically for us. And there were lots of wonderful national organizations and local regional organizations, but none at the time that really understood the specific nuances of what it is to care for underserved populations. And so that's really where ACU started. And gosh, I think 11 years ago now, ACU was really fortunate to receive a Bureau grant to support clinical workforce recruitment, retention, wellness, resilience, all of it. And that really began a much deeper journey in terms of the programming space with respect to workforce. We had always been very dedicated and committed to workforce from a policy and advocacy perspective in terms of National Health Service Corps and sort of other programming to support clinicians in this space, in the healthcare workforce space. But when the grant arrived or was awarded, it really kind of upped our attention, built out our programming, pushed us into a space specifically for health centers, primary care associations, and others. And we've just continued to grow and build since then. I think the other thing that has continued to evolve is that, there are specific resources, strategies, tactics, and focus as it relates to providers, clinicians specifically. But when you talk about workforce, it's really healthcare workforce more broadly. And a lot of the work that we do is with that in mind. And the work of the Star Center is really the foundation of a lot of that work. But as we've grown, as I mentioned, ACU has just been moving through explosive growth. And a lot of it has been focused on workforce because some of that is by necessity, but also very intentional. It's been a part of our strategic growth and plan. And so over the last couple of years in particular, we've brought on several additional contracts to support workforce programming, again, sort of across the healthcare workforce as a whole, but also specifically geared at health centers and others providing care in underserved populations and communities. And we decided actually quite a while ago that our kind of longer term vision was to launch the National Center, knowing that there was still so much work to do and that we needed an umbrella space to house all of our workforce programming, resources, and team to address those needs and the kind of ongoing evolving landscape of healthcare workforce as a whole. And so just so excited about launching the National Center, coming up on 2 months ago now, and to be able to respond to the needs of our network, health centers, and others more broadly in terms of that continuing need, but also as it continues to unfold and evolve, because it's not static. And so part of the creation of the National Center is to do that in an ongoing way. So while we're doing these sort of conversations and listening sessions right now, I think our commitment is to continue that for the duration, because we exist to support you all on the call today, but also the Health Center Network as a whole, and all of our other colleagues doing this work to support underserved populations as a whole. So we already have many things in the works and sort of planned. Suzanne and April and others on the team have been at this for many years, and I think have great vision and commitment around how to do this work. But I am also really excited, like I said, to be informed by the conversation today, and very much in an ongoing way. And please know that, if you're shy and you don't want to kind of share live here now, we're always available by, call, email, text, you name it, and happy to have offline conversations. So I will pause there and turn it over to Suzanne and April to get us a little deeper into the conversation. But I think Rick already flagged this. If you have questions, comments, and we are going to, I think, be posing specific questions to you guys. But as you are engaging with us, please use the chat. Don't be shy. You're not on mute. We want to hear from you. So Suzanne, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amanda. So glad that everyone could join us today. We're just thrilled to be having this conversation as it relates to us really building our National Center for Workforce Development and Training. So again, Suzanne Spear, Vice President of Workforce Development. And as Amanda mentioned, we have ACU has been in existence for 29 years, but about 10 or 11 years ago, in this, in a decade, the nearest decade, we were really in this current workforce era. We received our NTAP award. We're going into our 11th year of that work. And then about 3 years ago, we started receiving some other workforce programming and grants. And those funds and those grants and those NTAP awards are fantastic and wonderful. We have gotten to develop many relationships of folks that are on this call, and a lot of folks who are on this call today, but just some really amazing relationships, hearing about the needs of our workforce, responding to those needs as we were able. But what we really found is, and as Amanda alluded to, we found that there are things that we just couldn't do in the confines of that programming. And so we're going to be continuing that programming, but we really wanted a space to be able to evolve and be more responsive to the needs, as Amanda said, now and ongoing. We never want this conversation to stop. We never want it to be something where our members and our partners don't feel like they can come to us and say, hey, we really need this, and we really want to do that, and we want to be responsive to those needs. And so under our National Center for Workforce Development and Training, we're really going to be able to do that. And so we are so excited for this sort of era, this new era that we're entering in our workforce, National Workforce Center, and just really excited to have you all on our call today. And so with that, I will turn it over to April Lewis, who is the director of the National Center for Workforce Development and Training. And she is going to lead us and really kick us off with the questions that we're going to be posing today.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you all for joining. It's so good to be here. I can only echo what Suzanne and Amanda said. They laid the ground of the who we are, what we do, the why, the history to bring us to this very present moment. And first, I do want to say, if you see me looking down, although we're recording this because we're going to go back and study the information that you give us, some things I may take note of, and I'm also referencing my questions. So I just want to share that my eyes may go down off camera, but I am 100% here with you. So why a town hall? I feel it's imperative to hear from people that you're serving. I have been working with community health centers for 14 years, and I've had a really fortunate journey up from the physical health center to NAC to going back now serving in a consulting role and speaking. And I will tell you, the workforce is everything. And that's such a big word. It includes all the things that make work what it is and the execution of what you do and how you fulfill the mission. And it's the people. And all of us on this call know that people are complex beings, and there's a lot that is involved with leading people and managing people, and then helping those people be properly resourced and prepared to serve your patients. So as we were thinking and planning, and we've had a lot of conversations in the past 2 months, internally and also talking to other people in the field, just to see how can we be of service. And of course, the best way is to listen. We are not here to solve problems or really to give answers, even though I'm sure all of us would want to as best we can. But we really wanted to create this sacred space for you to talk to us in a town hall. We just want to receive feedback, and we're going to take this information. At the end of this, I'm going to share two of our kickoff offerings that we're going to have for the audience in the weeks to come. But we just want to get feedback from you. So hopefully you are gearing up and have come prepared to share. I do have some guiding questions just to get the ball rolling and to really pull from you some things that we like to hear from. And before I get into it, I want to share just the National Center, as Amanda said, it launched, and now we're building it to actually deploy the trainings, the resources, the technical assistance, everything that we're going to do to help you all strengthen your workforce. And we've landed on two critical pillars. All things considered, I wish we could have 15 pillars, if not 50, because there's that many moving pieces in a health center. When I say health centers and PCAs as you serve your member organizations, but we've landed on two pillars. And those pillars are training and development and organizational culture. Though everything that we're going to do and create for you is going to come from those two lenses, training and development and organizational culture. And with both of them, we are looking through the lens of your clinical and your non-clinical staff. We're looking through leaders and team members. We want to close the divide between operations and administration. We're looking at the workforce at whole, at a large. How can we train up your people? What training do they need? How can we develop them? How can we help you attract the right people and make sure you give them the resources that they need so that they can provide the quality care that all of you do? So this is just the beginning. And again, we thank you for being here, because what you say is what's going to fuel what happens over the next several months and several years with the National Center. I equate the National Center to a grocery store. I don't know where you shop, but I shop at Sprouts. I don't know if you have a Sprouts in your area. If you do, let us know in the chat. They take a farm to table model. It's like a farmer's market. It's really not, but they want to be like a farmer's market. But as with Sprouts and any other grocery store, when you go in, any aisle will have tons of the same item. You can go down the chip aisle and there are several chips. You can have healthy chips, you can grab veggie straws, or you can grab barbecue, or whatever the case may be, but it's still the potato chip aisle. The same as eggs. A chicken egg is a chicken egg is a chicken egg, but there are different brands of chicken eggs. You go over to the juice, orange juice is orange juice, but there are different brands. The same is in this space. There are a ton of amazing partners and organizations and agencies out here to support you that are providing resources to help strengthen your workforce. All of us are working together. All of us are going to deliver something different in a unique way. We just want to be here for you. And I say that to say, as you're answering the questions or asking questions, I don't want you to think about, oh, so many people are in this space, or this is happening and why this. It's more of, can we throw as many resources out to the field so we hit every open gap? So we can make sure that the healthcare professionals have what they need to be great, and we can maintain that momentum for years to come when all of us have moved on to the next phase of our life. It is really about legacy and sustainability of those out in the field, of you in the field doing the work. So this is one resource of many, and all of us are going to partner together to help you. And that's also going to be something I want to talk to you about towards the end. What does healthy collaboration look like for you all? So with that being said, as Rick mentioned earlier, as I ask the questions, all we'll need you to do is raise your hand and then you'll come off mute. We did webinar style in case you are somewhere where you can't be on camera, or you may be getting a late lunch in, or whatever the case may be, but we just want to hear from you. And we're going to start very simply with the biggest question, what are your biggest staffing challenges right now? When you think about your workforce and who you need to fulfill your mission and to serve your patients, and for those of you that represent PCAs, when you look at how you can provide that training and technical assistance to your members, what are your biggest staffing challenges?
And folks can either ask to raise your hand to be unmuted, or you can also put it into the chat.
While we're letting people chat, April, I will chime in with just sort of anecdotal what I've heard along the way. And I suspect you and Suzanne can probably chime in, but I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't hear from someone that their number one, if not number two issue is workforce challenges. I get really excited when it's not number one or number two. But the things that I hear most frequently is that it's not as much clinicians now or MDs and DOs. I hear more often that it's MAs, it's DAs, it's sort of that level of provider, that level of the provider space. And then I also hear it's all corners of the workforce. So it's no longer just clinician limited. It's also front of the house staff, reception, intake, call center staff, sometimes community outreach, community health workers, but I think even more so like operations and sort of kind of entry level. And I see we've got a couple things coming in the chat. So good to see.
Yeah. And thank you, Rick. I just saw that we had come into the Q&A. Amanda, do you want to read them out, or would you like me to?
Sure. Why don't we trade, Suzanne? We can do a little of both. I can read this first one from Stephanie. She just mentions that one of the biggest challenges is finding people for entry-level administration and clinical roles, and that unemployment is low in her area and they have a hard time attracting new workers. I hear that a lot, April. I don't know if you have reflections, or Suzanne, if you have reflections on that.
I do hear it often, and it's interesting. I also hear not only for attracting them, but keeping them, because in some areas, there are retail organizations or companies in food and beverage like Chick-fil-A that are paying competitive wages to what some organizations can pay their frontline staff. Some of their patient center representatives can go and work in retail for about the same pay and for seemingly less stress. So Stephanie, I'm glad that you mentioned that about the entry level roles, because it's happening across the board. Thank you. And I see that chat. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it said chat was disabled. I think we should maybe it's just using the Q&A feature.
Yep, absolutely. I think Rick's working on it, but in the meantime, we can just, I can definitely see the Q&A. I think we all can see the Q&A. So we had also somebody in the Q&A pod that said the biggest staffing challenge is finding applicants who really want to work.
That is so true. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? Like, you can totally keep dropping it in the Q&A. Raise your hand to come up. This is really a conversation for us to hear. So however you want to communicate, I'm just going to keep flowing through some of the questions. But if you hear something or you just want to add something that I don't get to, because this is your town hall, please just raise your hand or drop it in the chat for us. And so along those same lines, Stephanie mentioned frontline staff for administrative and clinical role. Are there any other specific roles that you all are struggling to fill? Are you seeing any trends in your vacancies? And I see the 347 number.
That looks like Stephanie.
Okay.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Conversation. I figured I might as well come off mute, but I had written the initial comment. I'm with the Primary Care Association in New Hampshire and Vermont by State Primary Care. And In addition, thank you. Good to be here. In addition to those administrative roles, the health centers are telling us that they also have difficulty finding people that want to advance in their roles. So the next, as the workforce overall is aging or thinking towards retirement, and they want to develop that next level of, it doesn't even have to be clinical, but in the nursing administrators or things like that, people are hesitant to take on and may not be in a position to take on additional responsibilities or even take advantage of training opportunities that the health centers are able to offer because of their outside responsibilities. So they're looking at being as creative as possible when trying to fill these roles and to get people to advance. But we have a workforce program here, and I think some of that is generational and some of it is organizational culture, and having the health centers have they have commitment to the people, but maybe having a stronger presence in that expectation of being an organization that will train and advance you through the ranks. So maybe there's some work that could be done there. And then behavioral health workforce at all levels is a significant challenge, and it just seems like there's not enough folks being trained across the board. And then health centers, if they're taking on new graduates, which their patients are complex, so it's a challenge to be able to do that. They sometimes don't have the clinical support to that individual who's providing the behavioral health services as a new graduate. And so having the capacity to do both. And it's not every behavioral health person is interested in or knows about the exciting opportunity to work in an integrated setting either. So there's a lot of competition for those individuals because there's great need across the board in places in private practice and in other types of settings. Thank you.
So helpful. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for that detail.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I was
Amanda.
just going to say, so a couple things. I think so just from a logistics housekeeping, because we're learning as we go, as much as we all use technology. So what we're going to do is if you put a hand up, we're going to unmute you. We have the system only allows us to do that one by one. I was just talking with Rick about, can we just take everyone off mute? But it doesn't allow us to do that. So if you raise your hand, we'll take you off mute. I know Anita, you had your hand raised. We're going to take you off mute now, and then also keep using the Q&A. And we'll continue to pull you up that way too. And if you're comfortable to do it, if you type something into the Q&A and you want to sort of add comment live, we can do both. But Anita, let me turn it over to you because I know you had your hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry. For some reason, I'm not able to communicate in the chat. So my apologies for whatever that issue is. But one of the things I wanted to speak to was one of the challenges that we're hearing from our health centers. And a lot of it is being able to offer the flexibility that other opportunities are able to offer, even in the sense of the flex schedule to where you can work 4 days, and have that extra day off. And hearing that some would actually prefer that even over the pay for the fact that they may actually have children, and having that 1 day off will allow them to take care of doctor's appointments instead of necessarily trying to get that through their PTO and that type of thing. So really being presented and being able to compete in the sense to where you can present flexibility has been a challenge for many of our organizations.
Anita, thank you so much for that. I have a follow-up question. Sorry, April. Wanted to ask, is that because of requirements from HRSA or funding, or is it just more an organizational culture type thing?
I think it varies from organization to organization, because in doing a couple of the site visits I've done, some centers are in a position to present that flexibility because of the structure that they have put in place to where it's very team oriented. Many of them, or some of them, I shouldn't say many, some of them have been in the position to where they can use that as part of their marketing towards recruitment, to where you can either have days on Friday, to where they have structured the organization to where you're not working a 4-day on Friday. So you got half day off on Friday, but that allows for some flexibility. I don't want to say it's necessarily a HRSA thing, but I think those centers who are not able to offer that is because they don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place or the resources in place to where they have the staffing to cover those days to where you can, the demand for the care in that particular community may just be too heavy of a burden. There's concern about the revenue. If we close, are we going to make revenue? Are we going to be, so that I think it varies from one organization to the next and what the challenge may be. But I do know that even some of the existing staff there feel like that would be a huge retention favor, right? If that was something that the health center could offer, to where, especially if they feel like they don't necessarily need to be in the center 5 days a week for 40 hours, right? So where you can offer those, you do so. And then there's also that hesitation to where, if I do it at this clinic, and for those clinics who have multiple sites, how do we make it fair for this other clinic, right? So if you are in a location to where you have multiple sites and you're able to offer that at one clinic location, but not be able to offer it to all of them, there's that concern there. So I think it's a lot of things, but that just speaks to that is a recruitment challenge, first of all, because you got so many women in the workforce, right? And then you look, in a lot of women, when I was doing active recruitment, a lot of our providers, especially our women, are looking for part-time. They don't necessarily want to practice full-time. So that's a recruitment setback right there. But it also does a lot in the area of retaining your providers and your front office staff. So that's just, one of the challenges, separate from, it's already hard to recruit for whatever factor. And I don't think, I want to challenge someone, because somebody said that finding people who really want to work. I think the challenge is not necessarily finding people who really want to work, but it's being adaptable to what people are looking for. People are out there and they want to work. Are you open and flexible enough to meet? We're working with this is a different day and time. And if we stay with that mindset to where we can only work, these hours and that, these many days a week, but are we as an organization being innovative? Are we being flexible? Are we being adaptable? Or are we just stuck, right, to where you have to do this, we're rigid? And I think being that way, for whatever reason, I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but when we're not able to flex in that sense, I think we lose a lot of potential to fill the workforce challenges that we have. And thank you. That's all I wanted to say, Amanda.
Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Anita. That was so helpful.
I was just going to mention, I think we have technology in our favor. Rick just told me that you can unmute yourself, or we're going to unmute everyone. And I think that we all have been through enough of these that we can mute and unmute ourselves when we want to say something. But hopefully that'll make it a little easier for folks that want to chime in. I will just say, Anita, I appreciate it. So I see both and I hear both, honestly. And I think the interesting thing about some of the work in this space is that it's so dependent on where you are in the country, what community you're in, the culture of that community, that state. And then I think there are other things that are very much universal, no matter where you are. But I have heard both, just to sort of affirm both of you, honestly, that Anita, I've heard what you just shared, which is, people want to work. It's just, can you adjust in a way that's going to be attractive to those people who are looking? I've also heard people say, we have bent over backwards and turned ourselves into a pretzel, and we just can't seem to figure it out, and that may have to do with, expectations that just aren't realistic for the model that we have. But I know there's other comments. So Suzanne, let me pause and see if you want to chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. So just looking at some of the things that have been put into the chat and Q&A, getting back to April, your original comment about the type of positions that that folks have put in. So Rachel from Michigan said that their health centers are struggling with oral health, both dental assistants and registered dental hygienists. And then another person said medical assistants, they're struggling for medical assistants as well. And then finally, in that sort of arena, we had dentists, and I believe it's dental therapists are two of our largest provider gaps in Iowa. And then we also had some folks had, some things just to, kind of chiming in with what you said in terms of that. So yeah, I think that about covers what's going on in the chat and the Q&A right now.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. And the comments are coming in. Like, this is such good information. And like I said, we're going to be pulling from all of this. So keep typing, posting. And even if we don't read it out, know that we're grabbing it and it's going to go in the final report that we're going to have internally. So with that, I'm going to shift us into leadership. So thinking about leadership, with your leadership hat on, what support do leaders in your organization need? What's the gap, some of the gaps that you're sitting in specifically for your leaders? Stephanie.
When you say leaders, are you thinking of C-suite or are you thinking of all the leaders? I know I'm just whatever parameters you can
That's
put
a good question. I'm like all leaders, if they're leading people, maybe director level and above, leading multiple people, not just the C-suite. Because I know there are some directors that manage, that lead a ton of staff. So think like director level and above for your leaders.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a slightly different level, but moving into that directorship, managing frontline staff is a gap. And especially in a clinical realm, we hear all the time from our health centers that they are promoting from within, and they're doing that, but finding the support that's needed, the coaching that's needed, and that training for frontline staff. And I think that moves them into those director level roles. Bi-State offers a leadership development program every other year, and it's a eclectic mix of roles from health centers, from clinical people to administrators to frontline managers, and it hits a lot of the notes, but a lot of that continued support is around the frontline leadership and also change management. Even though they're living it every day, it's something that, interpreting that for your team and being able to lead through that is something that people always need, I find, support in. And once they get it, sometimes they still want support, but the training in that area, those would be a couple for me. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you. Jude, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm pronouncing your name wrong, and I shouldn't.
It's Judd.
It's Judd. Thank you.
Judd, thank you.
Yes, that's all right, April. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought now. What was I going to say? Leadership, yes.
Yes.
Leadership. One of the problems that we see with leadership is maintaining their focus on workforce, and that particularly people in the C-suite will give you the lips. I don't want to say lip service. That's derogatory. We'll agree that workforce is the biggest issue because without staff, nothing happens. But when they sit down to do strategic planning, inevitably it seems that strategic planning focuses around operations and finances, and they lose track of how is workforce being woven through everything we do. And I think a lot of times in strategic planning, particularly with a lot of the strategic planning consultants that are out there, they came out of a CFO background, a CEO background, a COO background, and they are not coming out of the chief people officer, chief VP of HR background, and they lose that. And we talk about it, and then we gloss over it. And it's basically left up to the HR people and the recruiters to fill in the blanks with very little, with minimal support, I should say. Yeah, minimal support. And the other thing that I think enters into it with leadership are some of these government, I hate to use the term mandates because I sound like some sort of right winger or something, but these things like health profession education and training, the emphasis on that. There's no dollars that flow through that. Nobody's paying our health centers except for small grants here and there, or unless you can go through the whole emphasis, the whole process of becoming a teaching health center. There's no dollars in that, and yet those of us in PCAs are expected to promote this with our members, and it's a great idea, but where are the dollars coming from? And I think you see leadership looking at going and saying, well, yeah, that sounds great, but since there's no dollars, I mean, how do we do it? We can't do it. So I think but I think strategic planning is, to me, is key, and it's a challenge for a lot of leaders to really workforce into their strategic plans.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. Stephen?
Hey, everybody. Steve Bennett here from the Florida PCA. Just some comments. Hard to argue with anything that Judd ever says. He always gets it spot on, and we're going to miss him. I think we only have a few months left with him. The first comment that was made, I missed who was offering that, but I just wanted to offer some a thought on sort of the management piece of frontline people. So, here in Florida, we're really working on this concept of career literacy. And especially with frontline staff, many of whom this may be their first job in the mainstream workforce, who may see a competing job or at least a competing salary of, $20 an hour at Chick-fil-A as being actually competitive, right? And we do an awful job in this country as a whole within the labor market of developing career literacy and giving the tools and the language and the skills to people about how they build their career. I think the opportunity to really dive into that sits with our managers. And we do not prepare our managers very well for their own career literacy, let alone how do you help the people that you're managing develop their career literacy, right? How do you know when it's the right decision to move on? How do you know when you've just had a bad week? And let's let that sit and process, and let's keep going, right? And how do you have those conversations? So I think when you talk about your two pillars, training and development, organizational culture, so much of the work that we're doing here, but that we would love to be able to lean on you guys for support as well, is how we are giving the right tools to managers on how you actually implement this work, right, on a day-to-day basis, not adding work, but sort of augmenting what they're doing. Because I agree with the other comment that was made. People want to work and they want to feel good about the work they do, and they want to feel hopeful about the work they do. But if we're not helping them get to that point where they can understand, no, you're actually making progress. You're actually doing good work. This is actually a good wage, and here's what comes next. And you're building a retirement, and you're building PTO, and here's why that matters. If we aren't helping them understand and build those sort of concepts into how they make their decisions, of course they're going to leave if they see another job for $1 more an hour, right? Because that's shiny and it's intended to be shiny. So work that you guys are leading on how we better equip our managers, I think, is going to be essential.
Can I ask a question or a follow-up question on that? Because I think it's really insightful, Stephen. And it builds off of something that Judd said too, but that honestly has been coming up a lot. So HPET and sort of the role that HPET plays in what you're talking about, meaning, do you feel like there's a stronger, I think there must be a more clear pathway, maybe not always, but I'm just trying to connect the dots on what you're talking about in terms of career literacy and how HPET programming can help sort of stimulate those conversations and frankly exist as a tool to those managers is something. I guess part of what I'm trying to get at is, in the absence of an HPET, what are the most useful resources to support managers in having that conversation? And part of it sounds like, is just educating them on, look, this is a step in your path, and this is the direction that you can take. But I am also trying to find that balance between, okay, where you do have a very specific pathway and career ladder, is that sort of a North Star? Is that something that we should all be looking to achieve, including, and just as a sidebar, we are working on funding and resources to try to support that so that you guys actually have some help there too. but I'm just trying to reconcile that. So does that make sense, Stephen? And any thoughts on that or others in terms of like the role of HPET and how sort of what happens in the absence of that, and or what are the tools and resources that are most helpful in that absence, I guess?
All right, now I'm unmuted. All right, cool. So not sure I have a valuable response other than I'll say, um, just as we spend a lot of time on figuring out who we're hiring focused on technical competence, right? Medical assistant, a nurse, provider. We've got to have a similar methodology that runs parallel to the HPET stuff on who we're hiring to manage, right? And we've all been in organizations where, and I'll take this as the example, we take the best medical assistant and we promote them to be the manager of other medical assistants because we don't want to lose them. Well, being the best medical assistant gives us no evidence as to whether or not that individual can manage, right? And so, but what else do? We don't want to lose them. We've got a center here that is doing added value compensation, right? They're saying we're going to stop promoting people just to keep them. We're going to give them additional compensation because they're rock stars, because it's worth it. Like, we should be doing that in parallel with, let's prepare the people that we're going to charge with managing to actually be able to manage, right? And so you have to be, if you're going to be a manager, yeah, you got to know the technical and competencies for the job that you're managing. But I think there's a lot of centers, because I've heard it directly, that are far more concerned with the softer side of it, right? Do you know how to manage conflict? Do you know how to handle stress, right? What's your stress tolerance? What's the answer to that? What's the programming for that look like? If I knew that, I would be retired, and so I think that's what's in front of us right now. But I think that is the path, right? There's got to be a parallel path to all the energy we're doing on the HPET stuff of building those pathways for health professions with building those pathways for managing. Because the last thing I'm going to say, I promise, we know this to be true. The evidence tells us this. People do not leave their jobs because of compensation. Compensation is a proxy for all the other challenges they have, right? I don't get paid enough to deal with X. Well, X ends up being a lot of the missteps and the gaps that we're seeing with how people are managed, right? And how people feel valued and how people feel like they can advance. Obviously, we've got to adjust sometimes to millennials and Gen Zers about, you're not going to come in and 6 months later be, running the show. That's not how this works. But we can meet them where they're at and help them advance in a way that meets their needs and still meets the needs of the organization. Okay, I'm done, I promise.
Thank you so much. No apologies. That's what this is for. So Joni, I see your hand. Stephanie, did you have a hand? I know we just asked you. Did you have a hand? Did you have your hand up?
I did, and I took it down. I think the last gentleman covered, sort of what I was going to say around the HPET or HPET, whatever yes, it can go beyond clinical, but it's still structures within the health center, and that's just like, some things make sense if you're doing volume, and other things you don't want to build. You want to build the system for which people can tap into outside resources to get what they need, because it's just your scale may not support having something on your own, and yet you want the structure to support getting those additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan and Suzanne, did you have something in response to Steve?
No, I did not, but I did see that Joni had her hand up.
Okay. Hey, Joni, the floor is yours.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Yeah,
And
Joni from the
Mississippi.
Missouri PCA, just echoing everything that's been said. I'm shaking my head and not enough reaction, hearts and thumbs up to go along with everything. Kind of piggybacking on a little bit of I think what everyone has said, in particular with Judd on the strategic planning. And of course, you know, for all of us PCAs, we come to mind the comprehensive workforce plan and how that's just an integral part of, you know, when we're doing our training and technical assistance, the resources that you all provide are so helpful, you know, for us to have the idea of the chief workforce officer, or if no one has that role, who's going to play it. I think everybody has to own a little bit of that role. And so those resources, please keep improving those. They're just great as they are and top notch. So that really is a fundamental direction of some of the work that we've been doing here in Missouri. And just as you're talking about listening and engaging and working with the health centers, we've come to realize that bringing all these things together in terms of process improvement, and we all talk about continuous improvement and how that cycle works, and the whole idea of doing it is fantastic. But when places aren't, or they don't have the ability, or they're not shown continuous improvement and what that looks like, I think there's where we're seeing a lot of things fall through the crack here in Missouri. So, and how that can impact overall workforce culture has been amazing with some of the work that we've been doing the last year and a half. So looking at process improvement and trying to dive into the why and how people understand their roles and where the gaps are, what tools and resources that are there or lack of, to say my workers need training in this area, or we need a little bit more development, soft skills here. Those are, I think, what we've been trying to work with our health centers a lot with, finding out what they need. And a lot of it comes down to onboarding across the whole organization. It's onboarding, and we've kind of broken into 3 different buckets. Onboarding for the board of directors. I mean, man, that is so instrumental, and so many, I think, health centers have a lot of room for improvement. Can't automatically assume someone from the community knows how to be a good board member, and they know what their duties and responsibilities are. And there's lots of, like you said, we don't have to create a lot of these. There's a lot of good tools and resources we can lean on, thankfully, for that. But starting at the board level, and the way the board can support and actually make a statement in support of workforce efforts across the health center can make such a difference, that the board has recognized we need to take workforce, just as Judd said, strategically, and weave that through everything that we do. New employee onboarding, things that we all know, we don't have to spend time on that. We all know what that means on this call, but the importance of that. And then also looking deeply into patient onboarding. We've really seen a need for that throughout our health centers, and taking for granted that patients are going to show up, taking for granted they're going to be compliant. That, you know, they're not just being hard to get along with underserved populations and quote unquote those people. You know, just the way that's talked about within the walls of health centers, and the way that's viewed, and the false assumptions that go behind non-compliance, and those the many things that health centers deal with in terms of patients and patient improvement and delivering the best care. And if you weave all of that together and say it's to improve access, you know, we're onboarding our staff for these reasons, we're onboarding the board for these reasons, and we're onboarding the patients, I think there's a lot of room in terms of workforce that could be really impacted, in terms of everybody just understanding their roles and assessing the workflows and where the gaps are and what we could do better, and just really fully embracing that continuous improvement, not just as a lean 6 or a lean whatever they call it, but really cutting it down to the basis of that. And what we have found in Missouri doing that, and if it's done right and intentionally, it really, just by nature of how it's created, is inclusive. And by nature of how it's created is diverse. And so those are all things that, you know, always going to be working on, but some things that through holding listening sessions with our health centers the last year and a half that we've gleaned from, and I don't think we'll be too far off with other people across the nation in those areas. So I'm not sure if it was helpful, but that's my penny's worth of knowledge for today that I can share. Thank you all for doing this.
Thank you, Joni. Amanda?
Yeah, so I'm really appreciating this conversation. So I just want to say that, and all of the everything that's coming through chat and the Q&A. I do want to just pause because somebody asked about a fellowship, and actually ACU launched a fellowship a couple of months back, and it is designed for sorry for my 11-year-old that's putting his head in the picture right now. It's designed for anyone who is caring for the underserved. So it is not just for clinicians. It's actually for administrators. It's for literally anyone working within the four walls of a health center or a PCA or any organization that's caring for underserved populations. And we decided to build that because, quite frankly, there isn't anything that recognizes that as a specialty skill, which it is. And we wanted to make it inclusive beyond just clinicians or licensed clinicians, because it is a specialty that reaches, as I said, sort of all four corners of the work that's going on, whether it be health centers, PCAs, or otherwise. And so it's a relatively new fellowship that we launched. It is ACU's fellowship. We're actually really excited because we're going to announce our inaugural class of fellows at our annual conference is coming up the first week in August. But it's continuously open, and so the deadline for submission of the application on that has passed. But we're happy to share information, and we'll of course go through those rounds again. But I think it's a really important recognition and designation, honestly, for folks across the space that have this special skill set, and we'd love to share it more with you guys. But I just wanted to flag that because I think from a professional development perspective, and just something that can be shared really broadly across your workforce, I think we hope it will, like I said, sort of serve as a great recognition and a great opportunity to pose professional development for those who are seeking.
Thank you, Amanda. And that is a great segue into my next question. So now I want you to think about your culture. What barriers do you see in your organization when it comes to providing staff mentorship and professional development opportunities? Rachel.
I would say overall what we get is, well, we don't have the staff to do that. We don't have time to do that. You know, we don't. And as a nurse, healthcare's always been understaffed. That's always been how it is for the last 10 years. And we still trained students. We still grew new doctors. We still had new managers. But I often see it as a reason to close down those opportunities. Instead of being open to them. There's an impression that it's too expensive to train someone. It's too expensive to have someone shadow you. It's too expensive to have a student. Staff don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. And I see that attitude a lot from management, and not necessarily the people who would actually be working with a student, who would actually be mentoring someone. A lot of those people are a lot more open to it, but management perception is the barrier.
Thank you, Rachel. And Stephen, I see you off mute. Did you have something to add, or is that from last time?
Nope, nothing more to add. I don't see my mute button, so I'll rely on you guys to mute me again.
Okay, gotcha. And yes, continue to put it in the chat. Anything else as it relates to barriers for your professional development and mentorship for your staff? All right. And as we prepare to come to the top of the hour, I want to go into resources. Thinking about resources and collaboration, what type of collaboration between you at your organization and the national centers would be most helpful in addressing some of the challenges that we talked about today, and then challenges that you're sitting with? Essentially, what can we do to be of service to fill some of your workforce gaps? What do you need now that you don't currently have access to? Or is there something that you need and need it in a different type of way? And Rachel, is that a new hand or the other hand? Okay, just so. I just saw it go down. So I think that was from the previous comment. So what can the National Center do for you, and how can we best partner with you?
I guess while we're waiting for comments, 'cause I know we're close to the hour, but I will just chime in and say this. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and some of this exists, and so I don't want to recreate the wheel. However, I feel like there is constant recognition of just amazing best practices, new incredible ideas, innovations, you name it. But there, I don't necessarily see, and part of this could be my ignorance, a sort of one centralized repository to gather all of that, to impart that for everyone. And so I'm wondering if that's useful, to try to help organize all of that, but also to create a space for ongoing dialogue around these things. I think the PCAs do a fabulous job of trying to convene around that. ACU, of course, tries really hard. I think there are networks of health centers for a variety of different purposes and reasons. And so I think there's sharing that goes on in a number of different places. And so, like I said, I don't want to recreate the wheel or just add to something that already exists. But I think in as much as like, is it a library? Is it a centralized location for everything? Is it showcasing? I think, is it sort of like calling out, meaning what we are aware of, but also sort of an opportunity for others to submit and say, hey, we think this is really special. Let's elevate it. So those are some of the things that have come to mind too. I'm curious if that's useful or if you feel like you already have those things.
So
And as you all
wanted to
go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that I believe that we had just had a comment like not another login for another chat group. So maybe we could do that another way as a resource library there. So we'll do some noodling on that. But that's a good point, Rachel. That there's a lot out there.
Well, I was going to say, that's exactly right. Like, that's literally why I asked the question, because it's like, we already have so many platforms and we already have so many designations for things. And so what I don't want to do is create yet another one of those. But where there may be a gap, or if there is a way that would be more useful, we do want to be responsive to that. And so maybe it is a library, maybe we don't do that at all. I mean, honestly, maybe it exists if it's not necessary, but.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Rachel. I was commenting, yes, you couldn't see it, but I was commenting to the panelists, yes, because we don't want to add any additional stress. We want to relieve stress in your workforce, in your organization. So thank you for that. In our last couple of minutes, just think, workforce wish list, and whether you want to come off mute or put it in the chat, or like Amanda said earlier, send it to us. Just dreaming big, like considering what's been said or what hasn't been said, but the reality that you're living in your organization. What else? What is it that you need? Hard skills, soft skills, resources, technology, modules, train the trainer approaches, toolkits, like thinking about your day-to-day and the pain that you sit in that so intimately. We do want to hear like what else that you need. Like nothing is off the table. And whether you put that in the chat, and we're going to send a follow-up after this too. So if you process this conversation, if something else comes to mind, the line is open and we want to hear from you. And we're also doing another one on July 23rd. I don't think it's the same time, so I'll let Rick, like somebody confirm that for me. But we're doing it again because we wanted to make sure that we were able to get to everyone. So just think about what else that you would need, and we kind of tapped on the modality in which you want to get this information. Not another login. We can attest to that. More Zoom, webinars, in person. We just want to hear what would be most supportive for you and your workforce. So we heard a lot of good information. A lot of good information came in the chat. Some key takeaways. Thank you to all of you that listed some specific disciplines and roles that you're struggling to fill. We'll get with that. The need to be adaptable and nimble in recruitment and your retention efforts. that the health centers of today are not what they were yesterday and 10 years before. So how can we be responsive to the multi-generations that are inside the workforce? And the need for management training. It goes beyond just being promoted because you've been with the organization for a while. It's being promoted and then equipping them with the right skills so they can manage people. So I want to hand it over to Suzanne because she has something she wants to share with you, and then Amanda, and then I'll wrap us up and tell you what you can expect from us next.
Yeah, absolutely, April, and thank you all for joining us. So I think most of you know, but we do have a conference coming up. That's a way to engage with us and do several days of learning. So our conference runs from August 4th through the 7th. And I want to especially draw your attention to the workforce pre-conference workshop. And that is going to be focused on pouring from an full cup, organizational well-being, planning, and implementation. So if you're planning to come to our conference and want to do something exciting on Sunday afternoon, highly recommend that session. It's going to be some really great training there, and I just put the link there in the chat. So if you haven't registered for our conference, there still is some time, and thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Oh gosh, I just very quickly will say thank you again. I'm looking at the comments that are coming in. I want you guys to know we see all of them. Janet, I love your comment. Sounds like more for PCAs. There's just a ton of really good information. That's exactly what we wanted, guys. And so there is no ego of authorship or design. The National Center is meant to be living and breathing. And so we very much view all of you, PCA, Health Center, doesn't matter what level or what corner of the world you come from. We are so grateful and we want to continue to work with you and have these kinds of conversations. So no idea is too wild. I love nothing more than a big, grandiose dream and vision and making that a reality. So big thanks for today. And just a huge kudos to Suzanne and to April, to Rick and to Jen and the entire ACU team, because it's been an undertaking to launch the center, but I'm really excited for where we're going. And I am so grateful for this amazing team. So April, turn it over to you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, team. Thank you all for participating. Sorry, we took a few more minutes of your time. Be on the lookout. One of the first offerings that we're going to provide for you is a multi-series manager training. That's one track, and leadership training. We're working on the specifics of it, but what we're going to be delivering is content around core values and principles for managers and leaders. So regardless of urban versus rural, size of your organization, budget, skill set, we're just going to equip your people with core values and principles that they can customize as they manage their team members and as leaders lead the organization. So stay tuned. We're in the design phase of that with more to come. And with that, we'll give you back the rest of your day. Thank you so much for all your good feedback, and just reach out if we can be of service. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.